All right, welcome in. Hey, everybody. It is John Dickinson and Greg Silver. It's Just Dubs, our first breaking news edition. And there is some breaking news pertaining to the Golden State Warriors on a couple of fronts here on this Saturday afternoon, with the new league year now inside of 24 hours from officially beginning. But a lot of things across the NBA are breaking here throughout the course of the afternoon, and the Warriors have been part of that. And let's just get to the two big things here right off the top. And we want to stress that the second part, as it relates to Klay Thompson, because we are going to start with Paul George. We'll just go in chronological order here. And so let's just dive right into it. Paul George is declining his $48.7 million option, that within the last hour, according to multiple reports. He will enter free agency. So that effectively, Greg, ends the Warriors' pursuit of Paul George this summer. They will not get Paul George. They would have needed him to opt in for the 2024-25 season, $48.7 million, and then basically demanded a trade to the Warriors. So with the Warriors basically being told they're out in that kind of a scenario involving them and the Clippers, then he's going to test free agency. So he will be a free agent tomorrow at 3:01 Pacific time here on the West Coast. And so he's either going to go back to the Clippers and re-sign a new long-term deal with them, or he's going to sign with a team that has cap space. Philadelphia, reportedly now, the front runner to at least make him an offer. I think it's been reported he's going to meet with the Clippers first. But the Warriors, as they're related to Paul George, that we can say firmly, the pursuit of PG-13, probably the number one, top of the list big ticket item that was the most attainable for the Warriors. He is off the board. So before we start diving into this more deeply, let's also let everybody know what's going on as it relates to Klay Thompson. Shortly thereafter, after the Paul George news broke, there is reporting from Shams and from Anthony Slater of The Athletic. And the headline of that is that the Warriors are preparing to lose Klay Thompson in free agency. So we'll give you the gist of that. And the reporting from Shams and from Anthony Slater is that there has been close to no communication since the negotiating period opened for incumbent free agents a couple of weeks ago. I know there had been another report that the Warriors had made an offer that had been reputed, but the Warriors, I think intending, according to their reporting, to circle back with Klay, but Klay's got a lot of options, among them the Lakers, Clippers, and Mavs. So it's not official that Klay for sure is leaving. It is 99.99999%. The Warriors are done with the Paul George sweepstakes. That part we know. This part, though, is more the Warriors have not had communication with Klay. The Lakers, Clippers, and Mavs are among the suitors for Klay Thompson's services. And the last, I think, most important point of the reporting is the Warriors open to participating in a sign and trade to help his earning potential. So maybe the Warriors do a deal with the Lakers, Clippers, Mavs, or another team that wants to get in the Klay Thompson mix. But it's looking like things are very much down the road, at least at this stage, for Klay to be joining another team, though not official, come this time tomorrow. So a lot to digest. And another part I will just add here before we start into some of the opinions and takes and analysis on the whole thing is the LeBron James notes. LeBron James opting out, and part of him opting out earlier today was the fact that he wanted to give the Lakers a pathway to maybe have more money to sign a free agent or improve the roster. And so it looks now like the LeBron thing is directly related to the Lakers' specific pursuit of Klay Thompson. Basically, LeBron opts out, frees up more money in terms of a mid-level exception for the Lakers to offer Klay. And then LeBron can sign after the fact, and it would allow Klay to go there for more money if there isn't a sign and trade, and give him the pathway to get to the Lakers. So LeBron taking less basically to try to entice Klay Thompson to come. So a lot going on there. I think I covered all of the details of everything. Let's get into some of the opinions and analysis, Greg. We'll get to both. I'll let you choose where we want to go first, and then I'll react to it on the back end. But I will just say, overarching, we don't have the final news on Klay, but this is a very, 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 very bad Saturday afternoon for the Golden State Warriors. Still ways for them to improve, and we'll see what happens. But this is a bad day in Warriors history right now.
Yeah, not a good day, that's for sure. I know people are going to be riled up, and I think you've summed it up really nicely. You know, the Paul George thing is official, that he is opting out. My brain's been...
He's opting
the
out.
Language has been... he's opting out. The language has been driving me crazy.
And the Warriors cannot sign him as a free agent because they have no cap space. They can't do a sign and trade with him now that he's opted out because they'd be hard capped at the first apron. So that it's done. Paul George is not coming to the Warriors.
What I will ask you, just because social media is kind of like a high tide, rocky waters, there's a wave, it gets pulled back, everything's coming out in the wash all the time. I know a lot of people were asking on social media, why can't the Warriors do a sign and trade with Paul George? I just want to give you the floor on that while we work through everything that's official in every kind of scenario before we get to the opinions.
Yeah, you can't do now that he's a free agent or will be a free agent tomorrow, then they would have to, the only way you'd work out a sign and trade, it goes back to what the Warriors did when Kevin Durant left and D'Angelo Russell was also, I'm using this as an example, a free agent. If you take on a player that's a free agent that signs with their team and then you do a sign and trade with another team's free agent and he comes to you, then you become hard capped at the first apron. And it's like the Warriors would it doesn't work. The only other way the Warriors would have to clear a bunch of space. Again, it's not going to happen. So I don't even want to spend any time, like too much time getting into the minutia and confusing people. It's not happening. The Warriors would also have to clear a bunch of money off their books and renounce people's rights and all those different things to even have a shot, because they have to clear what his first year salary would be and all that. Again, it's done. Paul George is not coming. I think we well explained it there. Will he go to Philadelphia or the Clippers? Maybe we spend a little bit of time on that. But again, as it relates to the Warriors, this is a bad day because he was their best shot at potentially getting better in this offseason, and the best, I think, potential number 2 option for the Warriors, even an older option to pair with Steph Curry and then to build the rest of the roster for this next couple of years around Steph Curry and Paul George and Draymond Green with Steve Kerr, the head coach. And then you determine from that point, if you could have got Paul George, what do you do with Andrew Wiggins then? Do you keep Wiggins? Do you look to trade Wiggins for a player at another position that could be some depth? Jonathan Kuminga, I think, would have had to have been part of a Paul George deal if the Warriors were going to basically do a deal with the Clippers or a 3-way deal involving other teams. I think Kuminga would have had to have been going somewhere. And so I think it'll come out in the wash later as to whether Paul George just didn't want to come to the Warriors or the Warriors didn't want to pay Paul George a full 4-year max extension for somebody that's 34, 35, 36, 37, 38 over the term of the deal, or whether the Warriors just didn't want to give up Jonathan Kuminga to acquire Paul George. So all of those things are on the table. As to the reasons why, we don't really know the reasons why. Maybe Paul George just thinks his best chance to win is going and signing with Philly and Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. I actually think that is his best opportunity to win and flourish as the number 3 option. You know, we've discussed this. I still would have done the deal. I still think Paul George is the best potential option for the short term for the Warriors, maybe next to Jimmy Butler, who we can throw him aside and did earlier in the week. That being said, though, on Paul George, I think from a purely basketball standpoint, I don't think he's even a true number 2 on a title contending team. I think he's more of a number 3. And I think with what Embiid and Maxey have already established there, he would have gotten the Warriors closer and been their best chance. But I think from a basketball standpoint, if he goes to Philly, aside from the Philly fans that are going to be expecting a title where they're going to boo his ass right out of Wells Fargo Center, I think that's actually a really good potential destination. And I think a better destination for PG than even staying with the Clippers. So stay tuned as far as that part of it goes. But I mean, their Warriors' ability to truly go big and get back to contention in many ways, I think, and we're feeling it on social media, we're feeling it through the fan base here, has kind of gone by the wayside. And I think everybody now is wondering, what the hell are the Warriors doing? With also now bringing in the Klay Thompson news that essentially Klay's elsewhere until proven otherwise and probably gone, albeit not officially gone. We'll find out tomorrow around this time, Greg.
The Anthony Slater report on Klay Thompson was far from official, but it did very much feel like, in our modern landscape of digital media and how we consume news, hey, you should all prepare for Klay Thompson to be gone. I think this is a very likely scenario. I do want to get to the chat, our apple juice loving chat, albeit, because we went quick live and we got over 100 on YouTube and a handful of others on X and Twitch. So thank you all for joining us on a fine KNBR Saturday afternoon. Not a fine Saturday for the Warriors, like you said. We got Ben chiming in. Klay. Our buddy CA says, on one hand, happy that they're not trading away for Paul George, but the fact that Klay Thompson might not re-sign is a heartbreaker because of the 13 years. MVP JB, Mike Dunleavy needs to be fired. Bob Myers would have re-signed Klay. I mean, look, on Bob Myers left in part because he didn't want to have to make these decisions. You know, timeline-wise, this wasn't in front of Bob Myers. He could have had to be the one to break it up or re-sign knowing that the team wasn't going to get better. You know, Lakers is another discussion for Klay. We got our buddy down here, AB Prep Boy 33. I'm not sure what signing Klay does to improve the team. That's something we've touched on a good amount, where signing Klay alone does not necessarily make the team better, but not signing anybody and losing Klay certainly doesn't help either.
No, it doesn't. But here's where I am on that. I don't think the Warriors, because they're missing out on Paul George, should suddenly up their offer to Klay just to keep him. And it sounds like there's a lot of people in the YouTube chat that are honestly more annoyed at the fact that it's like, well, wait a minute, this team's not improving and they're not keeping Klay. WTF? And that I firmly understand. But I also think that's where you have to look at the simple fact that Klay Thompson on the Golden State Warriors, for nostalgia, might feel pretty good. And I'll defer to you on that maybe a little bit more. But I think Klay Thompson at a higher price on this Warriors team that doesn't go through the proper channels to really improve themselves is going to look worse and be more frustrated and more pissed off and more of, you know, maybe not the best teammate as he'd been here through the last couple of years. So look, I get it. And I had the question on social media earlier, as far as, you know, asking me, you know, what are fans who pay tickets, how are they going to feel about letting Klay walk for nothing and the roster that's left, on top of the fact that, and again, we do still have to let the remainder of the offseason play out as it relates to, you know, what are they going to do with Chris Paul's contract? We'll get into that coming up. Are they going to look to still move Andrew Wiggins, which I think they are shopping Andrew Wiggins, but to quote the great Ricky Waters, for who, for what? We got to find out who, you know, what all of that is going to entail, if it entails anything. But at this point, you know, I think a lot of Warrior fans are not going to be excited, to put it simply, with the team that they would have of, say, Steph, Pajemski, Kuminga, Draymond, Trace Jackson Davis, whoever they trade Wiggins for, and maybe they look to add somebody in the vein of Chris Paul. But that first five foundation, without knowing what they do with Wiggins or Chris Paul, I don't think that is the foundation of a team that's going to get anybody excited for the 2024-25 season. If anything, it almost is like you know, it really is truly kind of like the Kobe Bryant, you know, last couple of years, or Dirk Nowitzki without, before Luka, you know, a couple of years of just kind of floundering into the oblivion of, forget about the play-in tournament, the bottom five in the Western Conference. So I'll say this. I mean, there is still time, but this team right now is, I mean, they are among the bottom five in the Western Conference, and having the potential to get worse from that, depending upon what other teams do here in the next 24 hours to a week to 2 weeks. So I understand the frustration. I get the frustration, but it's on the Warriors to try and figure out what the hell they can do to try and get better. And I think their best avenues now to try to get better are, what do they do with the Chris Paul contract, assuming they opt in on it at this time tomorrow? What do they do with Wiggins? And I think they're shopping Wiggins. I'll say it again. And then are they going to be willing to put Jonathan Kuminga in the kind of a deal that could net them somebody legitimate, net them that true number 2 player, albeit a younger player, that all-star type player that they seemingly are adamant that they're going to have to acquire if they're going to include Kuminga in the deal. So a couple of different avenues here. Strike out on Paul George. Klay Thompson now on top of that leaving. Should the Warriors bump up their offer? Because I'll say this, and it sounds like he's already gone, and the reporting is no communication the last couple of weeks. It seems like in terms of teams, I talked about this yesterday with Pop and Lund, in terms of multiple of teams, there is a market. I think that market is largely him being willing to take mid-level exceptions. I think the Warriors would pay him more than the mid-level exception and accept that and not have it be a crazy lot of money. But it sounds like Klay Thompson's so pissed off that he's saying deuces no matter what. You should have offered me more sooner, and I'm going to go for the fresh start in another place. And I think that also stings Warrior fans in a different way on top of everything else.
Well, according to Shams, it's Lakers, Clippers, and Mavericks all expected to show interest in Klay, and possibly some others that were thrown around earlier in the offseason, like your Phillies and your Orlandos and your Oklahoma Cities. So the big curiosity question for me, which you kind of just glossed over right there, was how much money does he take for another team? Like, and I say glossed over as in kind of covered, not blew off. Like, if Klay takes a mid-level exception or not a lot of money for another team, yeah, that's going to sting more for Warrior fans, as opposed to him taking not a ton of money to stay with the franchise with which he won 4 championships, his splash brother, his other big 3 counterpart in Draymond, the coach that kind of took him to new heights in Steve Kerr, and to be the first one to leave and kind of be this first domino to fall. Like, I think, and I'll say this, JD, to speak on a little bit of the nostalgia factor, the dynasty is officially done the second Klay Thompson walks out the door.
Yeah, the second any of those 3 were to leave, and it looks like Klay obviously is the one that's farthest down the road here. It could be official by this time tomorrow. I've long said that, so I agree. I'll let you finish that sentiment. But no, the first time any of the big 3 between Steph, Klay, and Draymond would be off the roster, the dynasty as it was constituted is officially kaput.
Yeah, and I mean, I think just when you consider circumstances and timing, it is really unfortunate for Klay, because a lot of what happened isn't necessarily his fault. The 2 injuries, of course, I'm speaking on. I think when you look at before the injuries, he probably was the one of the big 3 who you would say his game would age the best over a long NBA career. He had more size than Steph. He was a better defender than Steph. Shooting is the kind of thing that doesn't necessarily go away, whereas Draymond's play style, you think his body would wear down easily. And by the mid-30s, he would be the one to have to go. So just for Klay to be the first one timing-wise in terms of contract, for it to get to this point, and the fact that he has declined due to injuries and still is not a bad player, he's just not a max player with the money he wanted. Oh, it kind of stinks, but it's the unfortunate reality of where the Warriors are at. And I think when you combine that with the news of an hour before about Paul George, now you're starting to see a sentiment online that, JD, I think you in particular have been very much all over this from the get-go in the offseason. I don't know if fans or social media have necessarily jumped to this point, but now they've jumped quickly in terms of what's the next, like, what are they going to do?
Yeah, I mean, the next move is, what do they do with Chris Paul? I mean, I try to look at it in a very literal, logical, chronological order. And I understand even going back to Jimmy Butler, although I don't think anything with Jimmy Butler ever got legitimately down the road, but I think you cross his name off the list as you circle through the best possible options to help get a number 2 for Stephen Curry, and you go from Jimmy Butler to Paul George. You cross Paul George off the list. I don't know who the number 3 on that Warriors list is. But I will say this, whoever the number 3, and DeJounte Murray was somebody we talked about. Obviously, he's gone from Atlanta to New Orleans, so you can cross him off the list. I don't know. Is it Lauri Markkanen? Maybe. And again, I think he's too good.
So the Mikal Bridges trade package to get Lauri Markkanen?
I mean, I think he's too good, albeit younger, but I think he's too good, too young. To where I just don't see the Warriors having the best potential offer for him. And obviously they'd have to be willing to get off Kuminga as part of that to do it. And there's been an unwillingness to this point to want to do that. So again, now it comes to, in the most literal terms, what do you do with Chris Paul? Do you look and do you look to move Andrew Wiggins? Again, the Klay decision, it sounds like, is going to be made for the Warriors here. And look, it also, and I've been more unemotional about the Klay situation because I've acknowledged, and Douglas Mikes in our chat, don't need the toxicity in the locker room. I've been very open and honest with the things that I've heard, and others I think have subsequently reported on it. Like, if you watched the Warriors these last couple of years, Klay Thompson at times was a pain in the ass. He was a bad attitude guy with the media, at times it appeared as if it was with his teammates. And look, I'm not trying to be one of these guys that flames somebody out the door. These are all things that we've talked about in real time. And look, because I think it's twofold for Klay. And I will say this. Klay's a 4-time champion. Okay. And I think we should say this first. Klay's a 4-time champion. He's a legend. I think before he came back from the 2 injuries, he was as carefree and no drama, just show up and play and get the job done, happy-go-lucky guy as you could have. And I think his personality type with Draymond's and Steph's were the perfect blend. They complemented each other perfectly on the court. They complemented each other perfectly in terms of their personalities in the locker room and off the court. So I want to make sure I say that. He was an Iron Man up until the night that he tore his ACL on June the 13th of 2019 here 5 years ago when they lost to the Raptors. He was an Iron Man. It was Game 6 Klay. It was 37-point quarters.
They were going to force a Game 7. They were certainly on their way to that.
It was just it's like Klay is an absolute freaking legend. Okay, and he will be welcomed back when it's all said and done with the warmest, loudest, happiest, just ovations and love and gratitude and thanks that any player possibly not named Steph Curry could have for the Golden State Warriors in their franchise history, and maybe for any team in any market's history. All of that being said, the last couple of years, I do think it's been different. I don't think there's been the connectivity between him and the organization since he got hurt, and then subsequently got hurt again when he was playing outside of the confines of basically what Rick Celebrini's plan was. Like, he was kind of doing his own thing and not doing the rehab plan basically that the Warriors had set out for him. I don't think he was the last few years the best veteran leader. I think he was put off by the fact that while he was working his ass off to rehab and come back, Jordan Poole got put in the starting lineup in the 21-22 year, and Jordan Poole was cooking with Steph Curry, and they were 18-2, and they were whatever the heck their record was when he came back, 29-8 or whatever it was, 31-10. But I think it was, I'm starting because I'm Klay freaking Thompson, and nobody could say, nah, even though you could have made a case that Klay could have come off the bench initially, at least, and to allow, Jordan Poole a little bit of time to continue with the way that he was cooking. I don't think he was the best leader to the young guys. I do think there was friction within the locker room because of those that maybe were viewed to be replacements to him. And then on top of that, you had the Warriors not pay him top dollar ahead of time. Like they basically were going to let it play out and make him go get an offer, make him go get an offer that they would match or not. And we talked about it a little bit within the last couple of days. And I said this to Lund yesterday. I think we've talked about this. I think the Warriors got it right in terms of their evaluation of Klay Thompson's market on the finances. What maybe they miscalculated or maybe they don't care about because he's been such a pain in certain instances in the locker room and unwilling, as Tom Tolbert said on KNBR, to maybe accept the role that the organization wanted him to have in terms of coming off the bench and playing fewer minutes, the role that Steve Kerr said in his exit interview at the end of the season that he must be willing to accept, it has to be open to accepting. I think maybe the Warriors just were, hey, it's better for everybody to move on, which has been something that's been discussed here more over the last couple of days. So that's no shade on the legend that is Klay Thompson. It's all love when he comes back, especially when it's all said and done. But I do think we have to recognize the fact that he did not recognize these last couple of years that he was a declining player that became inconsistent and still in many ways had to be coddled like a dude who was the guy he was in 2016 or the guy he was in 2019 pre-first injury. And so let's just be real. And he got hurt about it. And I think the organization was frustrated about it. Now, look, anybody that's watching this or listening to it later or in the YouTube chat now, you can feel however you want to feel. And again, it shouldn't take away anything from Klay Thompson's legend. But we also have to acknowledge why we are here with less than 24 hours to go. And the reporting from The Athletic is indicating the simple fact that it's more likely than not the Warriors are going to be without Klay Thompson's services, that they are preparing to lose Klay Thompson, the four-time NBA champion. No communication per Slater and Shams over the last couple of weeks and no offer made. Also reporting that the Warriors are willing to do sign-in trades with Klay and some potential suitors. I do want to get into that as well at some point, but just your thoughts as a guy that's been more of a Warriors fan through his life than I have been somebody who's covered this team basically for the last 15 years.
Oh, it sucks. Don't get me wrong. It's terrible that, you thought these guys were probably going to be there together forever. I mean, even when they lost to the Kings and Klay had the 0 for 10 and everyone stunk and it was just an ass kicking of a play-in game for a 9-10 team, immediately Steph goes to the podium. I can't imagine playing without those two. Draymond, we've always done right by Klay. Steve Kerr, I desperately want Klay back, et cetera, et cetera. So it never really seemed like a true possibility until really within the last week or two. I mean, I was certainly thinking they were going to find a way to keep him around. I know there were the negotiations and stalled discussions and the frustrations and everything, but yeah, Klay Thompson growing up and watching various games, like people's memory can be very, very short term. And I think that with a lot of the criticism that Steph got really up until that finals MVP and maybe having the season he had in 2021 when Klay wasn't present, I think a lot of it was, he can't do this without Klay. Like Klay's more clutch. He's made more clutch shots in big games and in the postseason. And that was kind of the nitpicking that a lot of people went off of. And that's not to take away from Steph or Klay, but the point is Klay in big games and in big moments was as great of a player for this franchise as anyone has ever seen. And I'm even talking about all the way back in the 70s with our legend Rick Barry. I wasn't alive to watch that live, obviously. But and the other thing I'll say about Klay too, because I pointed this out to you before, is that Klay is kind of one of the rare cases of a Robin to a Batman who, when it was time to be the number one guy, kind of understood that assignment and had crazy ways of stepping up. Like, you were never going to replace Steph or just fill that void when he was out. But in the little stretches when the Warriors had to find ways to get it done without Steph, always seemed like Klay, the task was never too big for him. And I think that's pretty cool when you're going to look back at the history of what he was to this franchise.
And look, we're talking about the potential, not official yet, end of an era. I mean, the note that's been floating around, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen it the last few days, there are 3 players, 3 in the entire NBA who have been on the same team since 2012. 3 in the whole league of 30 teams. It's Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. It's all 3 on the same team together for that point in time. So this has the potential to be the end of an unbelievable, in many ways, unprecedented era of hoop dominance for a trio. I mean, you can talk about this being the best trio, among the best trios. We'd really dive into it in NBA history when you look at the 4 titles and the finals appearances and the greatest regular season record of all time in that 2015-2016 season, and all of the unbelievable moments from the 37-point quarter against Sacramento to the 60-point game in 29 minutes on, what was it, 10 dribbles or whatever it was, or 4 dribbles or what, I can't even remember the number off the top of my head, in December of 2016. I mean, they're just countless big shots and moments from Klay Thompson and just the vibe of Klay Thompson. So I don't want this to be, and we're going to do potentially more tomorrow if news breaks tomorrow. And I would guarantee we probably will do something tomorrow at some point, probably right around this same time, when there is news. If the Warriors do something, we'll have the ability to go live and likely will. Here on the KNBR YouTube page. If we find out where Klay Thompson is going, if the Warriors are involved in a sign and trade type situation with one of the teams that's interested, that obviously leads and is a segue into how do the Warriors still get better? Because it becomes, what do they do? Like I said, with Chris Paul and the $30 million team option that they have until tomorrow to figure out. If I'm the Warriors, and look, I'll just lay it out. If I'm the Warriors, I'm looking to use Chris Paul to get a player or players flat out in the next 24 hours. I'm looking to do that. I don't know the names, and it might not be an all-star. It probably won't be an all-star at this point. But I'm looking to get a player or players as close to my second best player as possible, with trying to move Chris Paul. I'm looking at the Wiggins options. I'm not giving Wiggins away. Wiggins, as I've said a bunch of times, it's not addition by subtraction for me, especially now that you're not getting a Paul George or a Jimmy Butler. I think they're looking, as I've said a few times, to shop Wiggins. Here's the other ways you can get better. You do the sign and trade with Klay, and you allow him to get a number that the team signing him and Klay are comfortable with, and you take players back from those teams. So the other part of this, and we don't need to spend time on this part of it now, is the willingness, as we've talked about a lot, to include Kuminga in a deal. Let's not get into that now, because I think it's more about the 2 next steps. Paul George is off the board. Klay looks like he's out the door. And I'll just say this, I would not now last minute overpay Klay Thompson with so many other things in flux surrounding how this roster gets better. That I will say. But maybe that offer, whether it comes or not, is determined by the player that they have potentially lined up for Chris Paul. You cannot let Chris Paul walk and just waive, not pick up his option, allow him to become a free agent and do the savings, because you can't use any of that money to replace Chris Paul. So you got to look to make a move with Chris Paul. Secondary deal. let me let you speak to that, and then we'll get into the sign and trade, because I do want to go through the teams with reported interest. I want to go through their rosters real quick.
No, I'll let you go, because I know we don't have the most amount of time with all the KMBR stuff going on today, so I want to get to business.
Well, no, so it's the three teams that were reported: the Lakers, Clippers, and Mavs. And I'm just going to go through this, and I had the Dallas Mavericks salaries up here earlier, and I put out some tweets, and I got flamed by a few people because look, if Klay wants to go to the Mavs, then the Mavs have some say in who the Warriors get back. It's not like the Warriors have no leverage as to the players that they like. I've seen people say, "Oh, PJ Washington or Gafford." Let's say Klay signs a $23 million a year deal, wants to do that, a sign and trade, $23 million a year. You're looking at Maxi Kleber, and you're looking at maybe Josh Green. Maybe Maxi Kleber, $11 million, Josh Green, $13 million. You look at Dwight Powell's got a player option for $4 million, which I haven't seen if he's going to exercise it or not. I think he probably would if he hasn't already. And then you've got Jaden Hardy as well, who's making about $2 million for next year. So to me, I don't think the Mavs would not want to give up, in my mind, Josh Green, who's making 12, 13, and 14 the next couple of years. They just signed him last October. So to me, I don't think Dallas has a whole heck of a lot, Greg, that I'd really want. I mentioned Maxi Kleber not because I thought it was some great get, but more because I think it's a realistic player that, again, is not who you want to take back for Klay Thompson, a future Hall of Famer that's helped you win 4 titles. But I also think Maxi Kleber, along with maybe Jaden Hardy, would be 2 of the best players on the Mavs roster that Dallas would be willing to part with in an attempt to try to bump up Klay Thompson's pay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on Josh Green. I think he's an awesome young player, and I know he had a nice career at Arizona, too, in college. So I don't think that's someone they would be willing to part with.
I would say no chance on Josh. You can ask for Josh Green. I think they tell you no. How about Maxi Kleber? And then it's a matter of the Warriors saying, yeah, we'll do that. Or the Warriors saying, yeah, you know what, Klay, you're going to have to take the mid-level. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, there's no leverage with any sign and trade situation if Klay wants to go somewhere else.
Right. You gotta take I mean, people are saying PJ Washington. People are saying Daniel Gafford. It's like they're not giving up a top 7, 8
players
rotation
that just
player.
helped them get to the finals.
They're not giving up a top 8 rotation player for Klay Thompson. Let's look at the Clippers next. Obviously, Paul George is now out of the mix. PJ Tucker opted in, 11.5. They have Terrence Mann. And they have Ivica Zubac, who I don't think they would want to part with Ivica Zubac. But I'm looking at, again, if Klay's somewhere in that $13 to $20 million range, roughly, let's say in terms of salary, or $13 to $25 million range. The Clippers also have Norm Powell, who's making 19 and 20 the next 2 years. Maybe Norm Powell becomes somebody making 19 and 20 the next couple of years, I think, who could be in play. I don't think they'd do anything with Zubac. I don't think you'd want PJ Tucker, but it's those guys among those that the Clippers have available. Think those names if you're willing to do a sign and trade. Any of those entice you, or is there anybody else? Amir Coffey, who's could maybe be thrown in there. I mean, is there anybody else there among the Clippers roster that you'd look to do a potential sign and trade with Klay?
I mean, both Norman Powell and Terrence Mann are names that I don't mind. I think the question is, how full is your roster? Is Wiggins still part of the roster? What are we doing with all the pieces here? Because I like the 2 wings, and Norman Powell kind of torched the Warriors this year just by hitting threes. So I think they're both solid role players.
I think Norm Powell could help him. 19 and 20. Again, he fits the 2-year window. And if you took Norman Powell back for Klay Thompson, it would be a scenario where basically Podziemski's your starter, Norm Powell's your 6th man. You get some shooting. You get a guy who does have championship experience. I mean, he torched the Warriors in the finals going back to 2019 with Toronto, in addition to some games since then with the Clippers. So again, those are the kinds of names that I think you have to think of if you're thinking about signing trades. And then I'll look at the Lakers. The Lakers have, don't laugh, again, I'm going in the 13 to 23-ish $1 million range. D'Angelo Russell, wouldn't that be funny? Okay, moving on. D'Angelo, I said don't laugh. D'Angelo Russell, obviously the Warriors are not going to do that. Rui Hachimura, 17 and 18 the next 2 years. They have Gabe Vincent, 11 and 11 and a half. I wouldn't, they have Jared.
My Gaucho.
They have Jared Vanderbilt. Would you do Gabe Vincent and Jared Vanderbilt? 10 and 11 combined. But again, sign and trades. These are the names. Sign and trade with the Lakers. It's D'Angelo Russell. I'll just mention everybody. It's D'Angelo Russell, Rui. It's Gabe Vincent or Jared Vanderbilt. I do not mention Austin Reeves because Austin Reeves is too good. So you're not getting Austin Reeves, even though he fits in that salary structure. So I'm leaving him out. But for people that are looking at the salary board for the Lakers are saying, why do you mention Austin Reeves? Because he's already better than Klay Thompson. He's already better than Klay Thompson, and they may do something else with him. Douglas Mikes, oh boy, if Pods is a starter next season, I'm going to take up duck feeding as a hobby instead of watching Warrior games. Well, Douglas Mikes, don't do that because we're going to be live after every Warriors game. And
I was going to say, can you still be part of the Dubs OT?
Yeah,
I'll take the deal.
You better be part of Dubs OT, Douglas Mikes, if you do that. Do we want to continue? And I know we're up against it a little bit. Do we want to continue with Orlando? I do want to dig into the chat. I think we've covered everything, but let's do Orlando Magic roster quickly. Because I do think this plays today as far as potential salaries that could be included in a sign and trade for the Warriors. Wendell Carter Jr., 11 and 10 the next couple of years. I'm looking. They declined Joe Ingles. They've declined Mo Wagner, so take them off the board. You're not getting Jalen Suggs. Cole Anthony. No, not getting him. Who do they? I mean, it's Jonathan Isaac and Wendell Carter Jr. I'd take Jonathan Isaac for Klay Thompson if you could get him. $17.4 million for 1 more year. I'd take Jonathan Isaac.
I was going to ask how many years. Yeah,
he's got 1 more year left in the deal. Wendell, I think the two most likelies are Jonathan Isaac, 1 year, 17.4, and Wendell Carter Jr. has an 11.9 and a 10.8 for the next 2 years. So they fit both in the window, and those are the two in the Magic roster that I think you could look at in terms of possible sign and trades. And let's just for fun do Philadelphia. Let's just do Philadelphia. I'm typing it in here as we go because I didn't have all of these rosters up and salaries. So 76ers salaries. Well, here's the deal with Philly. You want to know something funny about Philly?
Yeah.
They have nobody under contract other than Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and Paul Reed. so you're not doing a sign and trade with them. there you go. I knew that they were very open. I didn't know they were that open. I've heard people say, well, they basically just have Embiid and Maxey, and because they have the ability to sign 2 players. Like they could outright sign Klay and Paul George. Yep. If they really wanted to do both. So sign and trade not necessarily in play there. All right, final 2-3 minutes. Let's get into the chat. I'm going to go from the top. CA, on the one hand, I'm happy we're not trading everything away for PG. We talked about that one earlier, but hearing the Warriors willing to sign and trade Klay is a heartbreaker. I think that's the overarching theme why I wanted to come back to that one here. Just beast up. Paul George has a better chance to win in Philly rather than the Clippers. I would agree with that. Too much. What would be the pivot? Who's the next guy on your board? And I don't think it's Durant because they're not trading Durant. I mean, I would say Markkanen.
I was gonna say like the next guy on my board of a wish list would be Lauri Markkanen, but I don't actually see them doing that trade, and I don't think Danny Ainge is gonna make a nice trade package that's friendly for the Warriors.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Our buddy Ebb here, I'm surprised any Warrior fan thinking Klay Thompson coming back would help anybody. He wants money. Warriors don't have it. Wish him well, though. I'll watch him anyway. Yeah, I think a lot of people. I think a lot of people feel somewhat along those lines. Douglas Mikes, if Lacob and crew are not willing to trade Kuminga in any trade, then we shouldn't expect anything more than Levine. Anything more than Levine. At this point, if Levine's the best you could get for Chris Paul, obviously Chicago wouldn't want Chris Paul. But if Levine's the best, so that would have to be a three-way deal. I wouldn't do Wiggins for Levine. I would not do Wiggins for Levine. I would if it's the best you can do, I would do Chris Paul and others for Levine. And maybe you take a pick back, because I know there was the report that, hey, you could attach, I can't remember who had it. Hey, you could attach a pick and teams still don't want him. That's how little teams want Zach LaVine at this point.
I'll say this.
Yeah,
though,
I would for CP. I would not for Wiggins. I'm going to say that.
This is Zach LaVine's massive contract aside, because that's been my biggest mark against him. But if Klay's off the team and you do Wiggins for LaVine, yeah, that might hurt you on the perimeter defense, like we've mentioned many times with Wiggins. Gives you some shooting.
It does, but then you don't have a three. Then you don't have a three-man on the roster. How do you get that? So, do you use Chris Paul to get that? I mean, I guess maybe you could. Like, those two to me are now tied together. Excuse me, in a big way. They're tied together. This team has to rebuild now. Wow. Hansola Dola. Yeah, KD might be fun. I think a lot of people would say that. At this point, Coop says, don't even make a trade for a big name, reset the cap, and just tank. They're not doing that with Steph Curry. Again, that's all the more reason why you go all in on trying to make something happen the next couple of years, and you're willing to give up some young players now, because you're going to be rebuilding later. The chat overwhelmingly believes Paul George is going to Philadelphia. I think that's what it's set up for too. I think Philadelphia said, hey, we'll give you the full max. Come here, be our number 3 option with Maxey and Embiid. We'll get somebody else and try to win a title. So yeah, that'll do it for us. Thanks to everybody for joining. We had a good crew here. Really appreciate those who jumped in. What's the next move? We'll be talking about it at some point tomorrow. So stay tuned to at JD John Dickinson, at Greg Zero Silver on Twitter, at Greg O Silver on Threads. I think I got that right.
You did. I hate the double username.
And so if you follow on Threads, and we're going to let you know on the KMBR socials what time we'll be back tomorrow. And if anything else breaks, we will be discussing it then. Where will Klay Thompson go? And what will the Warriors look to do to get better? Keep an eye on Chris Paul. Keep an eye on Wiggins. Keep an eye on the Klay Thompson sign and trade options. We laid out a bunch of names from all these prospective teams that have interest in Klay. All right, tough day for Warrior fans. We will talk to you tomorrow. For Greg, I'm JD. KMBR, the sports leader.